Hi, everybody. Thank you for attending today's webinar, Sanborn and AppGeo, and a conversation about state GIS. My name is Emily Reitz, and I am the Senior Manager of Applications and Technology at the National States Geographic Information Council. If you're unfamiliar with our organization, NSGIC exists to advance effective national coordination of geospatial information by supporting state-level cooperation. We serve as a national forum for the development of capable and future-oriented geospatial leadership. If you'd like for more information on how to get involved with us, please visit our website, www.nisgic.org. And I will also put that into the chat box in just a moment. Some reminders for our calls today. All attendees have been muted on entrance, and there will be time at the end of the presentation for Q&A. So please place your questions in the chat box, and they will be answered, and they will be read aloud and answered at the end of the presentation. Additionally, a recorded version of this webinar will be made available afterwards, so be on the lookout for an email with that information. And with that, I will now turn it over to the presenters. Thank you very much for joining us today.
All right, and Emily, thank you very much for having us today. I'm Aaron Doucette with AppGeo, and I'm the host of our webinar program here. And as Emily mentioned, you're here for a conversation about state GIS with Sanborn and AppGeo. And it'll be my pleasure to introduce our panel that you're hearing from today. Many of these folks likely need no introduction, but you might not be used to seeing them all in the same room. So with that, we have John Copple, CEO of Sanborn, Jason Caldwell, VP of Business Development and Sales at Sanborn. Jason, try not to drive too fast while we're talking on the call there. Kate Hickey, the COO of AppGeo. And of course, Bill Johnson, our Carpe Geo evangelist. Bill certainly has a habit of rubbing off on others, and I think for me that started with the mustache here. So now that I got you chuckling, Bill, I'm going to pass it over to you today to tell people why they're here and kick it off with our interview. But before we get to that, I do remind all of you that you can post questions in the chat, and I'll be reading them in our Q&A section at the conclusion of today's presentation. So we encourage your participation in that manner. And with that, Bill, to you.
All right. Well, thank you, Aaron. And welcome, everyone. Appreciate everybody joining us today. It's kind of interesting. We're all in different locations today. Kate Hickey, who's normally in the Boston office, is in California. Jason Caldwell, normally in Colorado Springs, is in Bowling Green, Kentucky. I'm normally in upstate New York, and I'm actually in the AppGeo Boston office. And interestingly, John Copple, who probably travels more than the rest of us, is at the base office in Colorado Springs. So we're covering the globe for you today. Before we get into the questions, I wanted to just offer a few comments of background that I think will give you some context here. I think we're in a really amazing time right now, especially for state geospatial leaders. We're seeing a massive influx of new spending right now, what some people are calling a once-in-a-generation opportunity. It's things around COVID relief, infrastructure investments, the Inflation Reduction Act. These are unprecedented new levels of investment covering a wide range of things that impact everybody. And a lot of this money is actually it's federal money, but it is channeled through the states, through grants to the states. And these programs now going forward are going to have a much heavier reliance on data than they did in the past. And not only a higher reliance on data generally, but a higher reliance on geospatial data, because it's becoming more and more important to understand these problems in a geospatial context. And none of the spending, well, I shouldn't say none of it, but very little of this spending particularly identifies GIS or geospatial in the requirements. That's for you and I to figure out based on what the objectives of these programs are and how they're measured, how they're monitored, how we know they're being successful. And it turns out a lot of that is geospatial. And because these programs are now rolling out to the states, this creates a really key set of opportunities for state GIOs or other state geospatial leaders. And the ones that are ready, that is the ones who really have what I like to call the infrastructure of coordination already in place, where they have they have a program mandate, perhaps through legislation or an executive order. They have a state advisory council. They have relationships, and they've been collaborating with the other agencies in their state. They've been building statewide enterprise data sets and have that enterprise mindset. These are the state geospatial offices that are going to be prepared to connect the dots between the lead agencies that are getting this new federal spending, which is not going to be the state GIS office. That's never going to be the lead agency for this spending. But to be able to support those other agencies with data and understand that requirements for that one agency can also be leveraged to meet a broad range of other useful purposes across the government. And these leaders are also the ones that know how to herd the cats and know how to step in and get coordination happening and not just be a bystander. So when you put all this together, this new level of spending, the understanding that is happening at states, the understanding that there's going to be massive data requirements around it, this just creates a moment of opportunity for state geospatial leaders like nothing I've ever seen before in my 38 years in this business. So with that as a background, I'd like to pose some questions to our panelists, and I'm going to start with John. John, you've seen a lot of things in your career, and I'd like to hear your thoughts about this moment that we find ourselves in right now. And perhaps related to that, I'm sure you've been thinking strategically when you made a decision to acquire AppGeo. So maybe you could share some of your insights that led to the decision to proceed with that acquisition. John?
Thanks, Bill. To follow on to what you were saying, when we look at the markets in a very broad sense from the perspective of most of the vendors, you have a civil government market and then include state, county, cities, and then you have a defense and intelligence market, and then you have a commercial market, and then you have an international market. So when we start talking about the civil side market, including states, counties, cities, I've never seen, to follow on what you were saying, I've never seen the kind of funding come to fruition as we've seen with these last two acts that have been passed. Just huge amounts of money. Now, that said, geospatial isn't called out as in a line item in most of the language. There's a few. EPA got $40 million for a GIS system and some things like that, but that amount of funding is just huge. And to further your point, most of it is related to has a relationship to geospatial activities. Although they're not called out, they are a foundation for a lot of the goals of those acts. And it's going to take a lot of collaboration with multiple entities to go after that funding. A ton of that funding is grant related. In the Inflation Reduction Act, there's about $80 billion of grant money. The actual federal agency money is relatively small. It's only about $13 billion. There's over 100 billion of loans and grants. And then the rest of it is what I would call a rebate program. If you want to go buy an electric car or do something like that, it's for corporations and people to give them an incentive to move to a greener environment, so to speak. But the amount of money that is out there is unprecedented. So that is a forerunner to the decision to procure AppGeo. The acquisition of AppGeo was ongoing, but the high level thoughts are we wanted a complete end-to-end geospatial services company focused on geospatial, not focused on some other market, but focused on the geospatial market and a company that could do anything, right, related to geospatial. Whether you wanted consulting or 3D models or LiDAR, whatever it is, we wanted the ability to respond and provide those services. And with the acquisition of AppGeo, you know, the opportunities are amazing that we've seen just in the first 90 days of working together. And, you know, we're looking forward to what that means in the future.
Great. I appreciate that, John. I'm gonna shift to Kate now. Kate, you've been involved in state geospatial strategic planning and development for about 15 years now, and along with building many complex statewide applications and enterprise data systems. I really don't think there's anyone else that's worked more of these kinds of state level projects than you. So I'm curious, what are some of the big changes you've seen in the way states are thinking about their strategies, about their programs, and how they're creating and supporting enterprise class GIS resources? So what changes are you seeing recently about that?
Yeah. Well, a strategic plan has always been the best way to identify gaps. Those might be data gaps, they might be technological gaps, or those, you know, coordination infrastructure gaps, what you were talking about earlier, you know, those that network of collaborative relationships that a GIO might have with other agencies. So that infrastructure, the human infrastructure there. So there might be gaps in those relationships there. But a GIO can use a strategic plan to identify those gaps and really close them early. And then they're in a position where they're prepared to respond to challenges, maybe, you know, challenges like we saw in the pandemic, or take advantage of some of this funding, these funding opportunities that are out there, and really affect change in their state and at the national level too. So the strategic plan has always acted as a foundation, and it's very hard to act or respond efficiently without that plan in place. So you ask, you know, what's different today? And I would say that the major difference, or the evolution that I've seen, is this universal recognition that success is not just about the data or technology. I think everyone is recognizing that the most successful states out there are the ones where the Geographic Information Office is working side by side, you know, collaborating with those agencies, and they're all working, they're identifying and working towards common goals. So, you know, for example, aligning and collaborating with the DOT or a broadband office, it really puts that GIO in a position where they can capture that available funding, you know, in partnership there. So I think, as you pointed out earlier, that funding might appear like it's aimed at a particular use case, like, well, this is aimed at broadband, you know, what does this have to do with the GIO? Or you know, it might be aimed at a particular agency, but what it results in is that statewide geospatial data or other geospatial asset that benefits everyone, benefits many across the board there. So for example, like a broadband serviceable location data set, it certainly meets those needs for identifying addresses and locations for broadband, but then it's clearly relevant for 911 or for powering a state geocoder or for lots of other use cases that need addresses. So really, you know, what I see is this shift toward prioritizing those relationships, prioritizing that collaboration infrastructure, and that begins to make a lot of sense.
Yeah, thanks. You know, while you were talking, you reminded me of a quote from Louis Pasteur that luck favors the prepared. So, you know, I think that's a lot about what strategic planning does for you. I'm curious to know what some of the synergies you're excited about with this new combination of AppGeo and Sanborn for our state clients.
Yeah. Well, we're really excited to be joining forces with, as John pointed out, another geospatial company. So while we're both, you know, purely in the geospatial realm, we're very, very complementary. It's been kind of amazing as we've learned more about each other. There's almost no overlap in what we've done. So the new larger combined entity gives us a holistic perspective on some of the problems that our customers are trying to solve. So for example, AppGeo is always focused on building tools to improve delivery of data or visualization of data, analysis of data, helping our customers make their data meaningful. But historically, we haven't been involved in the data acquisition or the capture piece. It was sort of like we were the receivers of that data. But now, in partnership with Sanborn, as John pointed out, we're covering that whole life cycle, from the strategy to the data acquisition to the delivery and analysis. And it just feels like the whole geospatial landscape has just opened wide up. It's really exciting.
Great, thank you. Jason, you have a unique vantage point, and not just because you're sitting in a rental car in a parking lot in Bowling Green, but your perspective on someone who's dealt with a lot of state clients, a lot of data systems over the years. I wonder if you give us some examples of projects that highlight some of these points of synergy between AppGeo and Sanborn that Kate and John have just been raising.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Bill, we're sitting in very interesting times. I mean, in my career, I don't remember the last time I could use the word $1 trillion of funding potential. So for someone that's in business development, that's actually really exciting and gets our eyes really wide. But I would think that the GIO would also be sitting with the same exact perspective that the business development group has. And, we definitely have seen a trend in terms of state agencies moving forward with what I would consider much more rounded types of contracts, where it's not just about buying the data, which maybe is how it was done 10 years ago. It is about what Kate was just mentioning, combining the data with intelligence, with distribution models, with other curated data, with the ability to essentially democratize the data. And so it's pretty exciting. And when you look at the different states that are out there and the types of contracts that they're releasing, from a sales perspective, being able to offer more than just the traditional products and services that Sanborn offered, now with the AppGeo combined solution, it really gives us this holistic view that enables a lot more potential for our business development group and for our clients in general. There's definitely many contracts out there that have this thought process behind it, but I'm actually sitting in Kentucky right now where we're part of a team where the actual state has procured a 3-inch oblique imagery program for the entire state. It's the first time that's ever been done. And so what you're seeing with that contract is there's a lot around it, right? There's visualization requirements. The tool that's going to be rolled out, the Sanborn Oblique Analyst for that program, was actually originally built by AppGeo prior to us buying AppGeo, but that really, I think, shows that example of how kind of the combined tool sets from both companies is very powerful. And obviously hosting and a myriad other of curated data that would go into the program is part there. When we look at other state contracts, I mean, we're seeing it across the board right now. It's very rare that we have a state contract that would be just for data. There's always additional analysis, additional visualization, and additional requirements that extend well beyond just the data itself, which is where Sanborn's been playing from a centric perspective. State of Texas, state of Georgia, state of New York, these are all state contracts where we do custom flying types of programs, but those contracts also require curated data from third parties. They require visualization components. They require distribution components. So all in all, I think we're really starting to see kind of that gap closed and clients really looking for solutions rather than just a certain data set.
Yeah, and so you're reminding me that so much of this has shifted from just a data delivery, and now so we're seeing a lot more requirements around software and tools, right? Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, the Sanborn Oblique Analyst is a perfect example of that. It's with oblique imagery, it's a little bit different than the traditional aerial downward-looking imagery. The other tools that we've actually looked at, Geodata Explorer, Giza, these are two tools that both of our companies have had prior to the merger. And it's interesting because the tools are really being created to create a much more efficient process for our stakeholders, the GIO groups, to be able to distribute and enable their stakeholders who are the actual users of the data. So that's been pretty powerful. I mean, we've seen that within the state of Michigan, state of Utah, state of Texas, where making sure that the GIO's end users are taking full advantage of the data set is very important. And so not just democratizing, but also enabling the use of it. And I think this is actually a really important aspect from our perspective internally to Sanborn and AppGeo, but also should be important for GIO's perspective as well. The more stakeholders that are going to be using that data, and the more information you have about how that data is going to be used, is really going to allow for these reoccurring types of budgets and projects to happen. So really kind of moving outside of that CapEx world to an OpEx world in terms of financial support for programs, we think is really powerful for anybody that is using these types of tools to get access to the data.
Yeah, and I love that idea that with this democratization trend around the data and the tools, that what had been a fairly small stakeholder community for a state GIO in the past has now been greatly enlarged and is continuing to enlarge. That's really great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, John, let's come back to you. So, we're seeing a lot of increase in the pace of data creation and maintenance, and new capabilities and new sensors, and just all these. The pace of change is just very rapid. And I'm curious if you would care to offer some thoughts about the kinds of things that you're interested in investing in to take advantages of these new developments. You're muted, John.
Thanks, Bill. As most of you know, I was, came out of the satellite imaging industry, ran space imaging in the very early days of satellite imagery. And there's an explosion on all levels of data capture and data availability. The satellite systems are just unbelievably numerous at this point. The next big chunk of satellite systems is going to be on the hyperspectral side. So now we have optical, we have SAR, we have hyperspectral satellites, but that hasn't diminished the need for aerial and drone-based solutions. The satellites have their place. They were originally invented for denied areas, and the response didn't need super accurate data. And so the satellite systems aren't capable of getting to the resolution and the horizontal vertical accuracy of the airplanes or the drones, which even go to a whole nother level of accuracy and resolution. So from Sanborn's perspective, we're not going to build satellite systems, obviously. We're going to continue with the aerial and drone-based capture methodologies, and we've been investing in additional aircraft and new drone technology, as well as Jason said, with applications like Geodata Explorer. So a state, a county, a city can distribute the LiDAR to everyone and allow them to see what's available in the library and interact with it, just like Giza does for imagery. So both a LiDAR application, an imagery application, we can see ourselves moving to some other applications similar to that to look at other data sets. We're going to be developing quite a few applications in the broadband space with our broadband contracts. One of those is related to addressing. Addressing has many more uses than just for broadband, whether it's, looking at next gen 911 or looking at elections or looking at, just a myriad of things that addressing can be used for. And so an application related to that makes a lot of sense. And we're working on that. Additionally, we've been looking at all the AI and ML buzzwords that are out there and what's going on, and change detection. And we've developed a online change detection viewer, as well as a lot of AI and ML based change detection analysis. Our internal AI team just won an award from DARPA participating in geo-registration and feature extraction on a DARPA program where they invented some new capabilities, and along with a few other companies. And we're continuing to look at that versus there's a lot of vendors out there doing AI and ML, and we've been evaluating the capabilities that they have. We're looking at Google Earth Engine as one of those applications that we might be able to leverage into our world in that high resolution world versus the satellite world that it was built for. And we continue to focus on efficiency solutions too. So Sanborn developed with AppGeo the Sanborn Oblique Analyst. We're about to do a major rewrite of that tool, as Jason was talking about. Tools to be more efficient when we're out in the field, get the data faster, get it produced faster. Doing 3D. We just completed over 600 square miles of 3-inch 3D for a county, and they're now leveraging that in their GIS software to do a whole number of analysis, as well as the tax assessors are using it to do tax assessments. So it's been a really interesting program for us to see people use 3D not just as a visualization, but actually integrate it into the analytical workflow. So across the board, we're, the geospatial front, whether it's buying new cameras and LiDAR systems and airplanes to collect the data, investing in new applications to do broadband or AI ML or whatever it is, we're continuing to make those investments because we want to improve the efficiency and use of the geospatial data. As we look back during the COVID, the use of digital data skyrocketed. We saw one of our biggest growth years ever during the COVID shutdown. Why is that? It's because everybody was at home wanting to do things on their computers. We just interacted with an energy firm who wants to create a 3D model of their whole refinery. Why do they want to do that? It's because all of their engineers want to work remotely from home. They don't want to have to go walk around the refinery and measure things. So, we're getting this new demand so that everybody can operate in a remote environment with digital data. And all of our tools that we're going to develop are going to be along those lines of being able to automatically create data or use it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We're running a little ahead of schedule, which is great. So I'm going to throw in an extra question that you guys haven't had a chance to think about. And I'll start with Kate. I wonder if you had any particular recommendations for GIOs that to take advantage of this kind of really unique opportunity we're in now, and the convergence of all these things that we've been talking about. What's your advice to a GIO?
That's a great question. Nothing like putting us on the spot. I mean, my advice is consistent. I think it's getting your house in order so you're ready to do these things, because all of the technology that John is talking about, all of the possibilities out there, they do rely on you having this foundational data in order, and then you can step up to from geospatial data, you can step up to geospatial intelligence. That is where you connect that data to business data, to information that is out there that is not necessarily tied to geospatial features yet. So I think it is about, get that foundation in place and make sure that you have the operational functions in place so that you can tap into all of the business intelligence that is available. That the pace is just going to be picking up. We're seeing the pace and the demand for information just increasing rapidly every year, and that's only going to continue to increase. And so I think it's having that baseline, not having to think about maintaining the baseline, have that in place, and you can reap the benefits of everything else that's out there.
Okay, great. Jason, you've now had like 90 seconds to think about this question. What's your advice to a GIO?
Well, I think there's a couple components there, Bill. Relationships obviously are huge, right? Relationships with all agencies within the state, I think, is really going to be a demand that the GIOs are going to have to embrace. I think they're already doing a great job on that, but just maintaining that is going to be very important. These funding sources are going to be coming from, a couple different, focused areas into a broad range of capabilities at the state level, right? And so it may not be a funding source that's coming directly into the GIO, it's going into one of those other departments. And so the other thing to think about is, how are you going to be able to take advantage of the data that would be created for a one-off program, but then can actually be used as an enterprise data set within the GIO and for the state itself? I think John hinted on that a little bit when he was talking about addressing, right? That's a perfect example where maybe it's being developed, addressing or building outlines or something of that nature for one program that then could be used for a variety of different programs. So kind of thinking about how to take, the information that's going to be developed and broaden the uses of it kind of drives to the discussion about ROI and making sure you have some level of back-end analytics that gives you some feedback in terms of who's using the data, how they're using it, why they're using it, all as kind of almost like a report card that can be used to say, hey, this is where we're getting the most value at, and this is how we need to kind of maintain our data moving forward. So a lot of that's already being done in some states. Other states, I think there's probably some need for improvement there, but overall, that's my perspective on it. So.
Okay, great. And John, your recommendations for a GIO?
Well, to add on to what Kate and Jason said, I mean, definitely having the relationships with the other agencies. We're working with a number of states right now to try to put those in place, because as we are working with the federal agencies and Congress, we're seeing opportunities, but they're not flowing directly to the GIO. They're flowing through another agency, and the GIO can leverage the money, whether it's the FEMA BRIC program is one example, or DOT funding. The DOTs have to go identify heat islands and underprivileged areas. That's a geospatial problem. And it takes a lot of geospatial data to solve it. And so, that should be something that GIO is involved in. And that's going to come through the transportation group. We're seeing transportation groups in many states fund, the procurement of content data, off the shelf data. And that's because they need it to do their job. Well, are they sharing it with the GIO so they can push it out to all the other agencies? I mean, these are things where the GIO's got to get out and talk to the other groups. I'll use another example, hydrology. It's coming down the pike, the 3DHP hydrology network that USGS wants to build for the whole country. That typically is not sitting in the geospatial domain of a state. It's sitting in a different agency. But as Joshua's, I saw him online and he's been participating in NSGIC. I think he can help a lot of people understand where to go look and who to talk to among their state if that knowledge isn't already out there. So, it is getting out and working with these other groups. And here in Colorado, we're seeing all of the lead be taken by a lot of the most, more local groups. I mean, the Denver Regional Council of Governments is moving forward, doing their own BAAs, because in some cases the state isn't doing much there. So, I think there's opportunity to work with the locals and get a lot of data. I mean, who's going to provide the culverts for every state to do the hydrology network? That'll be a big undertaking. So, it's the time for collaboration, Bill.
It's music to my ears. Love hearing that. Thank you. I'm going to ask one more question of all three of you, and then I want to make sure we have plenty of time to take questions from our audience today here. So if you haven't had a chance to drop your questions into the chat, you could do that maybe while we do this last round of questions here. So, we're here because we've got this exciting new combination of Sanborn and AppGeo. So I want to ask each of the three of you, why, if you're a state GIO, why should you care about that new combination? And Kate, let's start with you on that.
Sure. So I think, both companies have been in business for their entire existence to support geospatial programs and predominantly state geospatial programs. And so, that could be from strategy and advice through implementation. And then for the long term, looking at operational tools and operational support. And so, when I think about the combined entity, we can serve as a partner to a GIO through that entire life cycle. So we're in a much better position to fully understand all aspects of that and fully support that whole operation. We can advise them more effectively. We can build those integrated tools, as John was talking about earlier, instead of having separate tools for imagery and LiDAR, build integrated tools so that your users are seeing a single platform there, and really help that GIO build geospatial intelligence. I think especially on the AppGeo side, we were at a size where we weren't as scalable. And now it's so exciting for all of us at AppGeo because we feel much more scalable. We feel like we have the resources now to help a GIO meet all those demands, meet the technological demands, meet the strategy demands, meet the demands for increased pace. So we're excited.
Great. Jason, how about you?
So, Bill, I think it has to do with the fact that now under one umbrella and one contract, you can get access to a lot of different services, right? And really a comprehensive, holistic set of services that start all the way from the planning stage, through acquisition, through intelligence and data processing, distribution, and then actually data maintenance, right? So I've always talked about this as kind of the data life cycle. And it's an ongoing process, right? You're always understanding how the data is going to be used. You have to change that model up. But the focus here, from my perspective, and the value to the GIO and really any client is that under one roof, you get access to basically everything you can need for your geospatial requirements. Everything from data that can either be custom created or curated, all the way to distribution models and strategic planning and app development and just a wide range of things. So I think that combined with really the people, right? I think a lot of people within the GIO community are familiar with both Sanborn and AppGeo, and the quality of people that we have in both companies now coming together and working together, I believe really creates a powerhouse that we really haven't seen in terms of that geospatial intelligence capability. So.
Oh, I like that double entendre on geospatial intelligence. Well played there. John, you want to have the last word here?
Well, I want to follow on to Jason's train of thought there. While there's many geospatial technologies and capabilities that have come together under one roof here, the most amazing thing is the people that have come together and the knowledge base that has been created. It spans an unbelievable scope. So far in the discussions and the reviews and the things I've been in, it literally has not mattered what it is. We can tackle it, and we have resources to tackle it. And neither company by itself could have pulled it off, but together we're able to do it. I won't mention names, but with the whole broadband funding coming out and the schedule for that program, we now have customers that want us to be the program manager, the application developer, the data creator, just run the whole program for them. And we couldn't have done that individually, but together we've been able to marshal the resources to pull it off. And we're seeing that in other venues too. So to me, back to your word, Bill, or your words, geospatial intelligence, we put a lot of geospatial intelligence under one roof.
Oh, thank you. Love that summary. All right. We wanted to make sure we had time to take audience questions here. I'm going to ask my colleague Aaron to comb through what he's seeing in the chat and put those in front of us. Aaron?
Absolutely, Bill. And we do have a few questions that have come in, but it's certainly not too late to jump into the conversation. So feel free to add on as we go through these. There's a couple comments and a couple questions. I'm just going to go through these all. Neil McGaffey chimed in a little earlier to mention geo-enabled elections as another area where address data is critical. Any comments back to that around addressing and just the various needs and the drivers?
I'll just throw in the general comment. We're seeing address data really come to the fore in a lot of things now. I mean, NextGen 911 had been driving that bus for a while, and lately it's been broadband. And this new federal program to expand broadband is now all the mapping, all the eligibility, all the granting of that fund is at the address level. They're calling it the broadband serviceable location level, which sounds like a different, more specialized database, but it's really an address point database. So there's a new infusion of energy around addresses, which is just fantastic. I don't know. Others had anything to add?
I was just going to say we could probably have an entire webinar just talking about the use cases for address data, because it's just that's a project I would love to do, the ROI on address data in a particular state, because I think the use cases and the value generated by having accurate and maintained address data is just enormous. So yeah,
Right.
Thanks for chiming in with that, Neil.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So Neil couldn't stay retired. He had to come back to NSGIC here and hear us. All right, Aaron, what else you got there?
Sure. Another astute comment here from Leyland Pierce in New Mexico. They write, "It strikes me that the relationship of the GIO with the state council will be vital if states are going to make the most of the opportunities out there for funding, and by extension, making a difference because of that funding." So again, talking about that relationship piece.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. But I'm going to see Kate.
Well,
I
was going to say, Bill, I think you should respond to that. I know you have strong opinions.
Yeah, well, I do. I really feel like a GIO needs an advisory council that represents the sectors around their state, their stakeholder community, in order to be doing the job effectively. And that's even more so now that all these levels of funding are going not to the GIO, they're going to these other agencies and other groups that should be represented on their council. And this is where you can kind of sift the requirements among multiple stakeholders and find that common ground, to find the way to leverage what one partner now has resources to do, and the others can be contributing, maybe with in-kind services or some wraparound additional data enrichment or whatever it is. These are how you connect the dots. And I think this is really, really exciting. And the council is critical to that, in my view.
So Bill, is the council a part of collaboration infrastructure? Do you think it's a key component there?
I absolutely do.
I'll point to a very good example, but not at the state level, it's at the federal level. Kevin Gallagher created a multi-agency council to oversee 3DEP. And the strategy has worked amazingly well, because what has he done? He's gotten FEMA involved in 3DEP. He's gotten NRCS involved in 3DEP. He's getting the Bureau of Reclamation involved in 3DEP. I mean, he's got the U.S. Forest Service involved in 3DEP. By having created that council, that oversight council, he then was able to communicate the importance of the program and get funding from all these different agencies that would never had occurred before. I mean, NGAC is now doing a report on it because it's been so successful, and they want to create that model for other venues. But I think it's critical in the world we live in today. I mean, there's $4 billion of funding for water in the Inflation Reduction Act for the quote reclamation states. Well, that $4 billion of funding could go a long way towards funding a statewide QL1 LIDAR, to funding a statewide 3D HP hydrology network. I mean, but you got to work with the right people in the state to go get access to it.
Yeah. That's great. And again, we could talk all day about some of these things, but I want to see, Aaron, what else have we got in the queue here?
We have a couple more, and this one comes from another gentleman who can't seem to leave you alone, Bill. Jim Sparks asks, do the panelists feel that this large funding opportunity is the beginning of a new paradigm, or is it a bubble that will come and go? This is an important question for state staffing, right, which is hard to ramp up and down on a whim. So, yeah, what do we think about that?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jim. I do think that this is not a short-term bubble. I mean, these programs, these new federal programs, a lot of them have an implementation timeline of up to a decade. So this is not the kind of thing you would say, I shouldn't staff up for this, or I shouldn't think about the long-term resource requirements for this because it's a blip on the radar screen. These are big activities on a scale we haven't seen before. And they really require all hands on deck and working effectively with the partners, everybody coalescing around these things to make it happen. And anyway, I'd like to hear what our other panelists have to say too.
I agree with you. I think there's a couple of things here. One is the legislation isn't a 2 or 3 year window. The legislation stretches out to 2031 and sometimes beyond for the funding. But another thing, just in the bureaucracy and the issues government face, if we look at 2023 funding for the Infrastructure Investment Act, we're under a CR. The federal government's under a CR right now. All those appropriations are stuck. They're not moving forward as fast as everybody would have liked. And so until there are appropriations, which right now is looking like it's going to push into 23, the agencies can't start spending that money and put out notices of funding opportunities. So just the mechanism that the federal government has to go through to deal with such large amounts of money is going to stretch the funding opportunity here into more years. Mm-hmm. So I'm not good. I totally agree with you. This is not a bubble. This is like a decade-long thing.
Yeah, Jason or Kate, paradigm shift, or what are you seeing?
Well, I mean, I do think, I trust your guys' judgment in terms of what you're saying, but we've never seen $1 trillion before either, right? And so, even if there is a little bit of bubble associated with this, there's two thoughts I had, right? One thought has to do with the ideology of making sure that as the GIO, you can actually have some level of intelligence associated with the data that's being used, how it's being consumed, the value that the state is getting out of that, because that ROI is going to be very powerful as you start looking for additional funding sources to support what you are able to, create under this large funding opportunity from the federal level. The second thing always to think about is that a lot of times data maintenance costs a little bit less than creating the data from scratch in the first place, right? And so the thought process of using this funding to really get a lot of that solutions in place and then maintaining that cost is a little bit less. So that even if there was a bubble, I think you could still get through it and be able to take advantage of it and still have a very powerful solution moving forward, even if that's 5 or 10 years down the road.
Yeah, I'll just add that it's a time for public-private partnerships. It's I think one thing that we always try to do is build some efficiencies across the customers that we work with. So, the broadband program is an easy example that there are common goals in different states. And so we build processes and tools and applications that can help multiple states achieve their goals. And so I think it's, I would advise a state, instead of completely staffing up and trying to invent everything internally, use the relationships that you have with the private sector too to achieve those goals and help the private, allow the private sector to help you scale up.
Right. All right, Aaron, what else have we got in the questions here?
Got one more in the queue now, but it's not too late to add another one or two there. We have Dan Ross, who writes, while GIOs or other state leaders should follow legislation and potential funding sources, we're not always aware of where funding is available and what it can be used for. So what do you see as the role of commercial partners? Can or should they play in helping state and local programs to be aware of potential funding? So the role of commercial partners in that awareness role around funding that's out there.
Yeah, great question, Dan. And this is like the retired GIOs club today. We're getting seems like almost all of our questions are coming from that group. So yeah, I think that's key. I mean, what we're finding is that we can often help our clients understand with the details of these funding programs and things. I think you can think of it as kind of an early warning system. Think of the commercial sector as your partners to help you identify these things early on, to position you to be able to take advantage of these opportunities. Let's hear from our other panelists. Kate, you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a goal of ours to provide that insight to our customers. And I think it's part of a strategy too. And a strategy can take many different forms. A strategy can be a long process that looks deep at a lot of internal processes, or a strategy can be a quick process that's really helping connect the dots and identify, which are the best funding opportunities that you as a state and you in particular would be able to take advantage of. And I also think, the NSGIC community is clearly a really valuable resource for GIOs in understanding those funding opportunities too. And so I think of the private sector and the states as all being part of that community. And we as a community, it's our responsible to make sure that we're all informed of what's available to us.
Others, Jason or John?
Yeah, I think, NSGIC has an advocacy group, and, SCI is a great resource, and I think that's a task that should be given to the advocacy group to help identify these sources, as well as look at your commercial partners. Every major firm in this industry, including Sanborn, has its own advocacy group. We hire lobbyists in Washington to help us work specific issues. So, all the large firms have an advocacy group, and you should lean on those guys to help you identify these sources of funding. I mean, that's what we're doing at Sanborn for our customers. We have a couple of people working Washington for us. Kate participates in those meetings, and they're bringing us, here's where some sources of funding are for your potential clients, so that we can help our clients navigate the system. And I think that's what the commercial sector should be doing for the states.
Yeah. Thank you all for that. Aaron, do we have anything else? Any other retired or former GIOs putting questions in the chat?
Got one who's not retired yet, Bill.
He is a former GIO, though. I think he classified.
Yeah. Bird asks, well, he says, I agree with Kate on the importance of a statewide address point ROI study. If there isn't one yet, it seems like that could be a huge priority for NSGIC. He says, could be a big domino to set in motion, though.
Yeah, so. That's actually kind of an interesting point, not only because there's broadband resources now being applied to the address problem, where previously there were other use cases that were kind of leading with the funding on this thing, but now we're seeing more energy around a national address database. This NAD project that NSGIC has been strongly advocating for a long time now is picking up steam, which is really exciting. So there's not only opportunity space around individual states. this opportunity space around the national footprint of addresses in the form of a national address database, which is getting to the point of being real, which is super exciting. And an ROI around that, that's part of the mix of things that come together to make it all, to get it over the goal line as a complete thing. So thank you for that, Bert. All right. Anything else?
I think
We
that
have
closes
just
it
a
up
couple
for our
minutes.
questions. Yeah. I
Okay.
want to thank everyone here in the NSGIC community for joining us today for this rousing conversation. I don't know if Emily had any other closing remarks from their side, but she's shaking her head no. So I guess that leaves us just 1 or 2 minutes for any closing remarks from our panel here today.
No, I'm
We want to thank everybody for participating and attending, and we look forward to working with all of you as we always do, and look forward to being at the next conference.
Yeah, great. And a successful meeting ends early, so maybe we leave a minute on the clock and call it a success.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, thanks, everybody. Bye.